Welcome back to the podcast. Today we are talking about how some of the big companies such as Microsoft and Google are integrating AI into their software and making it available for everyone to use. And just before we hopped on this podcast, I actually received an email from Google. Now in my Google Chrome, I have an extension where I can actually just right click on a text box and tell it, describe what I want it to write, and it will generate a text for me based on my prompt, and then I can choose the style. Do I want it to be an elaborate response? Do I want it to be casual or more formal? So they're really, integrating a lot of these tools we've seen, with ChatGPT into their software. Microsoft recently did that after the Super Bowl. They integrated their Copilot AI into their just Windows software. So, Jaden, what do you think about this, and where do you see this going?
Yeah, so I mean, this is something they've been working on for a little while. Originally, it was Bard. This is even before they were launching all of their Gemini models. And I think I got access to like some sort of beta a while back, and it was, essentially giving you the ability to get like AI responses in your search results. I think that was in response to ChatGPT. They were like, oh no, people are going to go to ChatGPT instead of Google. So it feels like, if I'm being 100% honest, it feels like a lot of these AI rollout tools from Google specifically are like almost reactionary to what Microsoft and OpenAI are doing versus like, they had this like big idea. It's like, oh, people are using ChatGPT to help them write emails. Okay, we're going to embed like our own AI into Gmail, where it's just like, I don't know. I feel like they should have done it first, but whatever. That's another conversation. There's some really cool tools. I think when you're, when we talk about like AI hustle and starting your own, businesses and stuff, these tools definitely expedite everything, especially being built in, and especially in my opinion for a lot of these Google Suite tools. Have you tested out the responses on any of these, Jamie?
Yeah, so right before we hopped on, I tested. I said, write Jaden. I said I wrote the first sentence, the rest is AI, and then it basically responded back, and it took that and expanded it. It said, I just got the option to enable Google Assistant on my Chrome browser. I'm interested to see how Google, Microsoft, and other major players integrate AI into their software. Will they use it to enhance existing features or create new ones? Will it be a transparent part of the user experience, or will it be something that users have to opt in to use? So it basically just took that short little thought I had and expanded it in a pretty interesting way, because that's kind of exactly what we're talking about on this podcast. How are Google and Microsoft integrating this these AI tools? So I thought I did a pretty good job. Especially if you're trying to write a professional email to someone or respond in a thoughtful way, but you just can't quite get there on your own or don't have the time. It's a great time saver. So
yeah, I love that. I think that's super cool. One that I recently used, I want to get into Google search and the AI they embedded there, because I think there's a lot of interesting things. But really quick, I wanted to tell you about quite a useful one I did, which was the Gmail email one. You could just say, help me write an email. And then I said, my prompt, I think, was something like, invite Jamie McCauley onto my podcast, or, and so the email, it just automatically spit out for me was, hey, Jamie, would you like to be a guest on my podcast? I'd love to hear your thoughts on, and then it had brackets and just said topic, so I guess it needs me to fill in the topic. I kind of wish it had asked me like, okay, great, what's the topic of your podcast, or something like that, but whatever. And then it said the podcast is called, and then brackets podcast name, and it's about brackets podcast topic. It's a weekly show with a large audience of brackets audience description. If you're interested, please let me know. I'd be happy to send you some more information. Thanks, brackets, your name. Okay, whatever. So it essentially created me an entire template of this. Now, I still there's still quite a few things I have to fill in here. And maybe if I was more like specific, it could have written the whole thing for me. But overall, this is really useful. This is what I use ChatGPT for all the time. Although typically with ChatGPT, I'd say like, write me an invite, and it doesn't do the brackets, so just write an invite that's ready to go, copy and paste. And if I see it doesn't have all the details I want, then I would go and say, and make sure to mention this, this, and that, and then it would like redo it. So my only complaint here with this is that they threw all these brackets in here, and they wrote it in a way where like I have to go fill in their blanks. Whereas if I asked the same question to ChatGPT, I know it would have just, even if it wasn't as good, it would have just written like a more generic request that I could have just copy and pasted. So I don't know. I think it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, and I like, the point you made earlier is that they've had a lot of these, or at least similar tools up to this point. I don't know why they haven't, called it AI or integrated it sooner, because really this feature we're talking about is just an expansion on the autofill feature that Gmail's had forever, So I feel like they probably could have, released this earlier. So it probably is a reactionary. But another sort of AI feature that Google's had for a long time is if you ask it a question, it will sometimes show you your answer without having to go to a web page. It just kind of takes the data, the general answers from the top 5 pages and puts it into a little text, a little paragraph for you. They just released another feature. They're calling it SGE while browsing. So if you're on a web page, it'll kind of summarize the page for you over to the right, and basically do the same thing but on an individual page-to-page basis. So like I mentioned, they already have had these capabilities for a while. They're kind of just developing them in a deeper way. So
Yeah, that's interesting. And I haven't really used that one much. I'm gonna be honest. I think my Google search usage has gone down a bit after a lot of these AI tools have come out. And I know people that have completely replaced their Google search usage with like Perplexity AI or U.com and stuff. So I think that that's really interesting to see where that'll go in the future. What I will say is, playing around with it, I recently asked it, how can I get better at improv? And I was like, give me like the AI response on Google. So of course it's got like all of the normal responses below, but on top, it has like a bunch of bullet points on things you can do to get better at improv. And then what I thought was interesting is inside of its response, it has a carousel with like essentially Google responses. Now, what's interesting to me is, in its response, it doesn't like have hyperlinks to where it's getting the data from, which I think Perplexity does. So if you ask it a similar question, it's going to like answer your question, but every sentence it has a hyperlink to like the web page that it got that data from, which I think is really useful if you want more context. This, it seems to just have a carousel below with all of the stuff, but like I'm not going to click through all 10 of these links and see what each of these little tips got recommended. What I will say though is I think it's good that they're including the carousel, because then at least I'm not like, just getting all of the data here and no one's ever going to go to any web pages again, right? So I think for websites, they're happy that at least there's some sort of way you can still find them even in Google's AI response in their search results.
Yeah, I would love to actually use this tool. If you could use this Google tool on Reddit to like summarize forums for you.
Oh,
Because like half the time, I'm looking for an answer on Reddit to something and I have to read through like 20 forums to find what I'm looking for. If they could have use this tool, while browsing a web page to summarize all the forums, that would be awesome. But
that's true. That would be great. I feel like Reddit should build something like that, because they're kind of, they're about to IPO. They need to get in the game. So that would be great. I feel like Reddit tool. And again, I think you have a great point, because I'll be searching about some specific issue I have with some like piece of like equipment. And then I see like someone asked literally the exact same question as me on Reddit, and I'm like, oh, perfect, this is the right one. I got to click, but then I got to read through all the comments and back and forth to figure out, what the deal is. So here's something really interesting that my wife Jill does that, like, I don't know why, it blows my mind, and I bet a lot of other people do it too, but like for some reason it's not my like natural response. Anytime I have a technological problem, I'm like going on Google and looking at Reddit and whatever, and like I'll ask my wife, I'm like, hey, like, because she's a photographer, and so she's good with cameras and stuff. I'm like, hey, like, my camera is looking bad because of blah, 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 or like the frame rate isn't looking great, or I don't know, have something. And she literally just pulls up ChatGPT and like types her question in. She's like, okay, so ChatGPT says blah, blah, blah. It like, it breaks my brain to think like she literally has replaced Google completely with ChatGPT. And I want to feel like, oh, like my searching like does better. But like, honestly, she gets the right answer faster probably 80% of the time. And so it's I don't know, it's kind of crazy. I think Google really will be replaced by a lot of people. Like, I obviously have just like muscle memory habit of searching Google for responses and clicking on links, but like other people are starting not to, and it's actually faster, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think, based on that point you just made, I feel like Google, if they haven't released, some really innovative technology up to this point, I feel like they're gonna have to buy something that already exists to keep up with OpenAI. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think yes, but in today's regulatory environment, when the Federal Trade Commission or a lot of these like government bureaucratic organizations are shutting down acquisitions and mergers, I think Google honestly is in for a tricky situation, to say the least. I think Google's in for a tricky situation. They're innovating as hard as they can, but they're the giant in the room. They should be miles ahead. They should be a year ahead of OpenAI, but right now OpenAI seems to be about a year ahead of them because their new Gemini model that catches up to GPT-4 is, GPT-4 came out a year ago. So it feels like Google's about a year behind, and they should be 2 years ahead because they have 10 times as many employees as OpenAI, and they've had this technology they invented. They discovered the transformer. So yeah, I think Google's in for trouble. And traditionally in this situation, the big tech companies, when all these little small companies are innovating and kind of eating their, specifically like, being a threat to their bottom line business model, which I think Google is getting like, I think it's 80%. I got to double check, but I think Google's getting 80% of the revenue still from like Google search. And so when it seems like there's a threat directly to that, yeah, typically the traditional model would be they go and acquire OpenAI and a bunch of these other companies, but it doesn't seem like that's super doable as far as a hard acquisition. Now, you could argue they could do exactly what Microsoft has done and just buy 50% or invest 50% in a company, so they essentially own 50% of Perplexity. That might be a good move to make. But yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. This is the big leagues. We have Jeff Bezos investing in Perplexity, and I think Google definitely is probably feeling the pain, and the disruption is going to hurt them.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see where it goes. So if you enjoy listening to this podcast, please give us a review. It means the world to us. We love to keep you guys updated on the latest AI news and also tools you can use to make money. So thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.